17 high school students disappeared mid-performance in 1995. The audience waited in silence, thinking it was part of Romeo and Juliet. They never took their final bow. 30 years later, when demolition crews broke through the theater floor, what they found beneath the stage will haunt you forever. Welcome to Lost Mystery Stories. Before we dive into this chilling mystery of vanished performers, hidden rooms, and a truth that shattered a small Illinois town, tell me in the comments, have you ever been to a high school play that gave you chills? And if you believe these forgotten stories deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started. October 13, 1995. Riverside High School, Cedar Falls, Illinois. The autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves and anticipation as parents filed into the Riverside High School auditorium. It was 7:30 p.m., 30 minutes before curtain call for the drama department's production of Romeo and Juliet. The red velvet seats, worn smooth by decades of students and families, filled quickly with excited whispers and the rustle of programs. Margaret Williams adjusted her camera strap nervously, checking the flash settings for the third time. Her daughter Emma, just 16, was making her theatrical debut as Juliet tonight. "She's been rehearsing her lines in her sleep," Margaret whispered to the woman beside her, pride evident in every word. Behind the heavy burgundy curtains, 17 students buzzed with pre-show energy. The dressing rooms backstage hummed with activity as young actors applied final touches of makeup and adjusted period costumes that the drama department had spent months perfecting. Emma Williams stood before a cracked mirror, her hands trembling slightly as she fastened the pearl necklace that completed her Juliet costume. The white gown, handmade by her grandmother, caught the harsh fluorescent light of the dressing room and transformed it into something ethereal. "You're going to be incredible," whispered Jessica Martinez, who played the nurse. At 17, Jessica was one of the senior members of the drama club and had taken Emma under her wing from the first day of rehearsals. In the boys' dressing room, Marcus Rivera, Romeo, practiced his lines one final time. "But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east and Juliet is the sun." The words flowed naturally now, after months of rehearsal. Marcus was 18, a senior with plans to study theater at Northwestern University. This performance was more than just a high school play for him, it was his audition for the future. Sarah Chin, the stage manager, moved through the backstage area with practiced efficiency, her clipboard clutched tightly as she coordinated the final details. At 17, Sarah was known for her perfectionism and attention to detail. She had color-coded schedules, backup plans for every conceivable problem, and an almost supernatural ability to predict what could go wrong during a live performance. 10 minutes to places, Sarah announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone twice her age. "Remember, this isn't just a performance, it's magic. We're about to transport an audience to another time and place. Don't forget that responsibility." The cast gathered in a circle backstage for their traditional pre-show ritual. 17 young faces, flushed with excitement and nerves, joined hands as Mrs. Helen Rodriguez, the drama teacher, led them in their good luck chant. "Break a leg, but don't break character," Mrs. Rodriguez said with a smile that had encouraged countless students over her 20-year career. "You've worked incredibly hard for this moment. Trust your preparation, trust each other, and remember, the audience wants you to succeed." Among the 17 students were some of Riverside High's brightest stars. There was David Park, the class valedictorian who played Benvolio with surprising emotional depth. Alicia Thompson, captain of the debate team, brought sharp intelligence to her role as Lady Capulet. Tommy Chin, Sarah's younger brother, had transformed from the class clown into a surprisingly convincing Tybalt. The supporting ensemble included Maria Santos as Lady Montague, Kevin Wright as Mercutio, Ashley Johnson as the nurse's assistant, Robert Kim as Paris, Lisa Wong as Rosalind, Stephen Adams as Friar Lawrence, Catherine Martinez as Lady Capulet's friend, Brian Thompson as a Capulet servant, Diana Rodriguez as a party guest, James Park as a Montague kinsman, and Amy Chen as another party guest. Each student had spent months developing their character, memorizing not just lines but the emotional landscape of Shakespeare's tragic world. They had become a family bonded by late-night rehearsals, shared pizza dinners, and the unique intimacy that comes from creating art together. As 8 p.m. approached, the energy backstage reached a crescendo. Sarah checked her watch, a silver timepiece that had belonged to her grandmother, and made her final announcements. "Places, everyone. House lights are dimming. This is your moment. In the auditorium, 247 people settled into their seats. Parents, grandparents, siblings, friends, and teachers all waited in anticipation. The house lights dimmed slowly, and a hush fell over the crowd like a blanket. None of them knew they were about to witness one of the most baffling disappearances in American history. 8:07 p.m. The curtain rose with mechanical precision, revealing a stage transformed into Renaissance Verona. The drama department had outdone themselves with the set design. Painted backdrops depicted ancient stone buildings, while carefully positioned lights created the illusion of flickering torches and moonlight. The prologue was delivered by David Park as the chorus, his clear voice carrying every word to the back of the auditorium. In fair Verona, where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. Margaret Williams raised her camera, but something stopped her from taking the first shot. There was something almost sacred about this moment, her daughter's transformation from teenager to artist happening before her eyes. Act 1 proceeded flawlessly. The fight scenes were choreographed with precision, the romantic scenes delivered with surprising maturity for high school students. Marcus Rivera's Romeo was charismatic without being overly dramatic, while Emma Williams brought a freshness to Juliet that made the familiar story feel new. In the audience, drama teacher Mrs. Rodriguez watched with the critical eye of someone who had seen every mistake possible in high school theater. But tonight, her students were exceeding every expectation. The blocking was perfect, the lines delivered with confidence, and most importantly, the emotion was genuine. During the famous party scene, all 17 actors filled the stage in a carefully choreographed dance. The ensemble members, dressed in period costumes of rich fabrics and vibrant colors, created a living tapestry of Renaissance celebration. Their movements had been practiced hundreds of times, but tonight they seemed to flow with natural grace. Jessica Martinez, as the nurse, delivered her comic lines with perfect timing, earning genuine laughter from the audience. Kevin Wright's Mercutio was both witty and tragic. His Queen Mab speech performed with such intensity that the auditorium fell completely silent. By intermission, whispers filled the lobby. This is the best production Riverside has ever done. These kids are incredible. I can't believe they're just in high school. But it was Act 2 where everything would change. 8:31 p.m. Act 2 Scene 2. The famous balcony scene. The stage was set with minimal props. A simple wooden structure representing Juliet's balcony, surrounded by artificial moonlight that cast everything in silver and shadow. Marcus Rivera entered stage left, his Romeo costume, a deep blue doublet with silver trim, catching the light as he moved. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Emma Williams appeared on the balcony, her white gown flowing like water in the stage lights. The pearl necklace her grandmother had given her caught the light, creating tiny stars across her throat. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name. The dialogue between the young lovers was electric. Months of rehearsal had created a chemistry that transcended the stage, and the audience leaned forward, completely absorbed in the tragic romance unfolding before them. Behind the scenes, Sarah Chen monitored every technical cue with precision. The lighting board operator, senior tech student Michael Chong, followed her signals perfectly. Sound technician Jennifer Liu managed the subtle musical underscoring that enhanced each scene's emotional impact. Everything was perfect. Too perfect, some would later say. At 8:34 p.m., something unprecedented happened. The stage lights began to flicker, not the harsh, mechanical flicker of electrical problems, but a gentle pulsing like candlelight in a breeze. Michael Chong checked his lighting board frantically. All systems showed normal. The flickering wasn't coming from his equipment. In the audience, a few people shifted in their seats, but most assumed it was an intentional effect. This was, after all, a candlelit scene in Shakespeare's original staging. Then, at exactly 8:36 p.m., something impossible occurred. The temperature in the auditorium dropped 15 degrees in 30 seconds. The cold hit the audience like a wave. Breath became visible in the suddenly frigid air. Parents pulled jackets tighter, children shivered, and somewhere in the back row, an elderly man began to cough. But on stage the actors seemed unaffected. Romeo and Juliet continued their passionate dialogue, their voices carrying clearly through the suddenly arctic air. "What's happening?" Margaret Williams whispered to her husband, But before he could answer, the stage lights began to dim. Not the controlled dimming of a planned lighting cue, but a gradual fading, as if someone was slowly turning down the brightness on an old television set. Sarah Chin stood in the wings, her clipboard forgotten, watching in horror as every technical system she had carefully planned began to fail simultaneously. The lights continued to dim. The temperature continued to drop. And then at 8:37 p.m., the auditorium plunged into absolute darkness. Not the darkness of a power outage, where emergency lighting kicks in and exit signs glow reassuringly. This was a complete absence of light, so total that people couldn't see their own hands in front of their faces. The darkness was accompanied by a sound that no one could quite describe later. Some said it was like wind rushing through a tunnel. Others described it as a low humming, almost musical. A few swore they heard whispers in a language they didn't recognize. Margaret Williams reached instinctively for her camera, her finger finding the shutter button in the darkness. The flash fired, illuminating the auditorium for one brief, frozen moment. In that split second of light, she saw something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The stage was empty. All 17 students, Romeo, Juliet, and every member of the ensemble, had vanished. The darkness lasted exactly 47 seconds. Investigators would later verify this time using multiple wristwatches, cell phone clocks, and the auditorium's security system timestamp. When the lights returned, suddenly as if someone had thrown a switch, the stage remained empty. 17 young actors had simply ceased to exist. For several heartbeats, the audience sat in stunned silence. Was this part of the play? Some avant-garde interpretation they hadn't been warned about? Then Mrs. Rodriguez appeared from the wings, her face pale with terror. "Has anyone seen the students?" Her voice cracked as she called out to the audience. "They were just here. They were right here." The silence shattered like glass. Parents erupted from their seats, rushing toward the stage. Margaret Williams was among the first to reach the edge of the orchestra pit, calling her daughter's name into the empty space where Emma had stood moments before. "Emma! Emma, where are you?" Behind the scenes, chaos reigned. Michael Chung abandoned his lighting board and began searching the fly gallery above the stage. Jennifer Liu checked every storage closet and prop room. Other students and faculty members who had been backstage ran through the building, calling names and checking every possible hiding place. Principal Janet Morrison arrived within minutes of being called. She was a calm woman with 30 years in education, but nothing had prepared her for this. In all her experience with teenage pranks, accidents, and emergencies, she had never encountered anything remotely similar. "Seal the building," she ordered security guard Tom Reynolds. "No one in or out until we find them." The search began immediately. Parents, teachers, and volunteers spread throughout Riverside High School, checking every classroom, closet, bathroom, and storage area. They called out names until their voices were hoarse. Emma, Marcus, Sarah, Jessica, David, Tommy, Alicia, Maria, Kevin, Ashley, Robert, Lisa, Stephen, Catherine, Brian, Diana, James, Amy. No one answered. The theater itself was examined inch by inch. The dressing rooms were exactly as the students had left them. Costumes hanging on hooks, makeup scattered across tables, personal belongings untouched. Sarah Chen's clipboard lay on the prop table, her careful notations still visible in her precise handwriting. But here's what made the disappearance truly impossible. The theater had only 2 exits, both of which were monitored. The main doors to the auditorium had been watched by ticket takers throughout the performance. The stage door was locked from the inside and required a key that only Mrs. Rodriguez possessed. The fire exits were equipped with alarms that would have sounded if opened. Security cameras covered the main hallways. Yet somehow, 17 teenagers had vanished without triggering a single alert or being seen by any witness. By 10 p.m., the Cedar Falls Police Department had arrived in force. Detective Ray Morrison, a 28-year veteran with experience in everything from petty theft to homicide, found himself facing a case unlike anything in his career. "In 30 years of police work," he would later tell reporters, "I've investigated missing persons, kidnappings, and runaways. But I've never seen 17 people disappear from a locked room in front of 247 witnesses." The first 24 hours of the investigation yielded more questions than answers. The FBI was contacted within hours, and by morning, federal agents had joined local police in what was becoming one of the most baffling missing persons cases in American history. Special Agent Diana Walsh, a specialist in unusual disappearances, arrived from Chicago with a team of forensic experts. She had handled cases involving cults, organized crime, and international kidnapping, but the Riverside High School disappearance defied every category of missing persons case she knew. "Let's start with the basics," Agent Walsh said, addressing the joint task force that had assembled in the school's library. 17 minors, ages 15 to 18, vanished simultaneously from a secured location. No signs of struggle, no evidence of forced entry or exit, and no indication of advanced planning. The initial forensic sweep revealed several disturbing details. Every student's personal belongings remained exactly where they had left them. Car keys were still in lockers. Purses and wallets contained money and identification. The few students who owned cell phones, this was 1995, when mobile phones were still uncommon among teenagers, had left them in their backpacks. More significantly, the costumes the students had been wearing were nowhere to be found. The Romeo and Juliet costumes, along with all the period pieces worn by the ensemble, had vanished along with the actors. "That's the detail that rules out abduction," Agent Walsh explained to Detective Morrison. "Kidnappers don't waste time collecting costumes. They grab people and run." But somehow, 17 teenagers had time to completely undress before disappearing. The search expanded beyond the theater to include the entire Riverside High School campus. K-9 units were brought in to detect any scent trails. Thermal imaging equipment scanned the building for hidden spaces or heat signatures. Ground-penetrating radar examined the foundation for tunnels or underground areas. Nothing. The students had simply vanished, leaving behind a mystery that would consume the small town of Cedar Falls for decades to come. The Williams family hadn't slept in 48 hours. Margaret sat in her daughter's bedroom, surrounded by the artifacts of a teenage life interrupted. Homework assignments left unfinished on the desk, a half-read novel bookmarked on page 127, college brochures scattered across the floor from a future that now seemed impossibly distant. She was so excited about this play, Margaret whispered to the FBI victim advocate assigned to their case. She'd been practicing her lines for months. The night before the performance, she made me help her run through the balcony scene one more time. She was perfect. She was absolutely perfect. David Williams, Emma's father, had taken leave from his job at the insurance company to coordinate with law enforcement. A methodical man by nature, he threw himself into the investigation with obsessive intensity, creating charts and timelines, following up on every lead no matter how far-fetched. "Someone knows something," he insisted during the daily family briefings with investigators. 17 teenagers don't just evaporate. There has to be an explanation. The Rivera family faced their own unique torment. Marcus had been their golden child, the first in his family to be accepted to a prestigious university, a young man with dreams of becoming a professional actor. His parents, Carmen and Roberto Rivera, had immigrated from Mexico specifically to give their children opportunities they never had. "He was going to be somebody important," Carmen said through tears. "He was going to make us proud. And now?" Roberto, a construction worker with hands worn rough by decades of labor, found himself helpless in a way that no amount of physical strength could overcome. "I can build houses, fix cars, solve problems with my hands," he told Detective Morrison. "But this, how do you fight something you can't see or understand?" Each of the 17 families experienced their own version of this nightmare. The Chens, Sarah's parents, both doctors, approached the disappearance with clinical precision, demanding medical explanations and psychological profiles. The Martinezes organized prayer vigils and community searches. The Parks hired private investigators to supplement the official investigation. But regardless of their backgrounds or approaches, all the families shared the same desperate question. Where were their children? 3 weeks after the disappearance, while conducting a final sweep of the theater building, FBI forensic specialist Dr. Elena Rodriguez made a discovery that would shift the entire investigation. In the prop room behind the stage, wedged between a painted castle backdrop and a rack of medieval weapons, she found Sarah Chen's personal journal. It had been hidden so well that previous searches had missed it entirely. The journal was leather-bound, a gift from Sarah's grandmother, filled with the stage manager's meticulous notes about the production. But it was the final entry, dated October 13th, the night of the disappearance, that sent chills through the investigation team. "Something's wrong with the theater. I've been feeling it for weeks, but I didn't want to worry anyone. The floor beneath the stage sounds hollow when you walk on it, like there's empty space underneath. Sometimes I hear sounds down there, not mice or settling wood, but something else. Something that sounds almost like voices. I asked Mr. Peterson, the maintenance supervisor, about the building's foundation, and he showed me the original blueprints. According to the plans, the theater was built on a solid concrete slab. But I swear there's something underneath. During dress rehearsal last night, I could have sworn I heard applause coming from below the stage. Old-fashioned applause, like from an audience that isn't there. I must be imagining things. Opening night nerves, probably. But just in case I'm not crazy, I'm hiding this journal. If something happens to me, to any of us, I want someone to know that the theater has secrets. Look beneath the stage. Look for the space that shouldn't exist. Agent Walsh read the entry 3 times before speaking. She knew, she said quietly. Somehow, Sarah Chin suspected that something was going to happen. The journal entry triggered a complete re-evaluation of the case. If Sarah was right about hollow space beneath the stage, it suggested a completely different scenario than mass abduction or teenage runaway. We need to examine the building's foundation, Agent Walsh ordered. And we need to find out what happened to the original structure that was here before Riverside High School was built. The Cedar Falls Historical Society occupied a small building downtown, filled with dusty archives and yellowed photographs of the town's past. Mrs. Evelyn Martinez, the Society's volunteer curator and grandmother of missing student Jessica Martinez, had been fielding calls from investigators for weeks. "You want to know about what was here before the high school?" she asked Agent Walsh, pulling out a thick folder from a filing cabinet. "Well, that's a story most people have forgotten. And maybe some wanted it forgotten." The land where Riverside High School now stood had a history dating back to the 1920s. From 1923 to 1961, it was home to the Orpheum Theater, a grand vaudeville house that was the pride of Cedar Falls. The Orpheum was beautiful, Mrs. Martinez explained, spreading old photographs across the table. 3 stories tall, with ornate decorations and seating for 400 people. It brought culture to our little town, traveling shows, local productions, even some famous performers back in the day. But the Orpheum's history included a dark chapter that had been largely forgotten over the decades. It happened in 1934, Mrs. Martinez continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. During a vaudeville show called Mysteries of the Mind. There was this act called The Vanishing Cabinet. A magic show where performers would disappear and reappear in impossible ways. Agent Walsh leaned forward. What happened? 12 performers went into the cabinet during the finale. None of them came out. The audience waited, thinking it was part of the act, but the performers never reappeared. They searched the theater from top to bottom, but those 12 people had simply vanished. The parallel to the recent disappearance was impossible to ignore. 12 performers in 1934, 17 students in 1995. All vanishing during live performances in front of audience members who initially assumed it was part of the show. What happened to the theater after that? Agent Walsh asked. It struggled for years. People were afraid to perform there, afraid to attend shows. The Orpheum finally closed in 1959 and was demolished in 1961. But here's the thing. Mrs. Martinez pulled out a set of architectural drawings. When they built the high school, they didn't completely demolish the Orpheum. The basement and foundation were left intact, and the new building was constructed right on top of it. Agent Walsh studied the drawings with growing excitement. If the Orpheum's basement still existed beneath Riverside High School, it would explain Sarah Chen's observations about hollow space under the stage. Mrs. Martinez, Agent Walsh said carefully, do you have any records about the basement of the original theater? The elderly woman nodded slowly. I do. And you're not going to like what you find. The excavation began on November 15, 1995, exactly 1 month after the disappearance. Using the original Orpheum Theater blueprints as a guide, construction crews carefully removed sections of the Riverside High School theater floor. The work was delicate and methodical. If there were any clues to the students' fate beneath the stage, investigators couldn't risk destroying them with heavy machinery. Instead, they used hand tools and small pneumatic devices to carefully expose what lay below. 6 feet down, they hit something that shouldn't have existed according to the high school's construction records. A wooden floor. The discovery sent electricity through the investigation team. Agent Walsh was the first to descend into the space they had uncovered, her flashlight beam dancing across surfaces that hadn't seen light in over 30 years. What she found defied every expectation. The basement of the Orpheum Theater was perfectly preserved. The air was stale but breathable, as if the space had been hermetically sealed. Vintage 1920s decorations still adorned the walls, Art Deco patterns in faded gold and burgundy, ornate plasterwork that had been the height of fashion when the theater was built. But it wasn't just an empty basement. This was a complete theater in miniature, an underground performance space with a small stage, seating for perhaps 50 people, and electrical systems that appeared to be from the 1930s. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the forensic specialist, as she followed Agent Walsh into the subterranean theater. "According to every record we have, this space was filled with concrete when the high school was built. Yet here it was, a secret theater frozen in time, waiting beneath the modern stage like a forgotten memory." The most disturbing discovery came when they examined the underground stage area. Scattered across the performance space were 17 sets of costumes, the exact Romeo and Juliet costumes that had vanished with the students. But the costumes weren't just randomly discarded. They had been carefully arranged in the exact positions the actors had occupied when the lights went out above. Emma's white Juliet gown lay center stage, arms spread wide as if she had been reaching toward her Romeo. Marcus's blue doublet was positioned nearby, one hand extended toward the Juliet costume. The ensemble costumes were arranged around the stage in a perfect recreation of the final scene the audience had witnessed. And every single costume was warmed to the touch. FBI forensic teams descended on the underground theater with scientific precision. Every surface was photographed, measured, and tested. The costumes were carefully bagged and sent to laboratories for analysis. The air itself was sampled for any trace of the missing students. The results were as baffling as the discovery itself. DNA evidence confirmed that the costumes had been worn by the 17 missing students. Traces of skin cells, hair follicles, and even saliva from the theatrical makeup matched the samples taken from the students' personal belongings. But here's what made investigators' blood run cold. The DNA evidence was fresh. Not weeks old, not degraded by time and exposure. It was as if the students had removed the costumes moments before the forensic team arrived. Temperature readings of the costumes showed they had been at human body temperature, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, when discovered. After 6 hours of exposure to the 55-degree temperature of the underground theater, they should have been cold. "It's like they just stepped out of these clothes," Dr. Rodriguez reported to Agent Walsh. "But that's impossible. We've had the building under surveillance for a month. No one has been in or out." The mystery deepened when investigators found a handwritten note pinned to Juliet's costume. The paper was modern, not the aged parchment you'd expect to find in a 1930s theater. The ink was fresh, and handwriting analysis confirmed it was written by Emma Williams. The note contained a single, haunting message. "We're still here. We're still performing. The show must go on until someone finds the truth. Look for the door that leads to tomorrow." The discovery of the underground theater transformed the investigation from a missing persons case into something unprecedented. FBI behavioral analysts, quantum physicists, paranormal investigators, and experts in unexplained phenomena descended on Cedar Falls. Dr. Marcus Thompson, a quantum physicist from MIT, proposed the most unsettling theory yet. "What if they didn't disappear in the conventional sense?" he suggested during a consultation with the investigation team. Quantum mechanics suggests the possibility of parallel dimensions, alternate realities that exist alongside our own. Under certain conditions, perhaps involving intense emotional energy, electromagnetic anomalies, or even the acoustics of performance spaces, it might be theoretically possible for people to slip between dimensional barriers. Agent Walsh was skeptical. "Are you suggesting that 17 teenagers fell into another dimension?" "I'm suggesting that we consider possibilities beyond conventional physics," Dr. Thompson replied. "The evidence doesn't fit any normal explanation. Perhaps we need to expand our definition of normal." Meanwhile, paranormal investigator Dr. Sarah Henley brought a different perspective to the case. "The Orpheum Theater had a traumatic history," she explained. 12 performers vanished during a show in 1934. In paranormal research we call these thin places, locations where the barrier between our world and others becomes permeable. Intense emotional events can create lasting impressions, and theaters are particularly susceptible because of the concentrated psychic energy of performance. She paused, considering her words carefully. What if the 1995 performance somehow activated whatever force caused the 1934 disappearance? What if these students were pulled into the same space, the same situation as those long-lost vaudeville performers? The theories ranged from scientific to supernatural, but none provided concrete answers about where the 17 students had gone or how to bring them back. As weeks turned to months, the families of the missing students refused to give up hope. They organized daily vigils outside Riverside High School, maintaining a constant presence that reminded the community, and the investigators, that 17 young lives hung in the balance. Margaret Williams became the unofficial spokesperson for the families. Every morning, she arrived at the school carrying a thermos of coffee and a photograph of Emma in her Juliet costume. She would sit on the front steps, speaking to anyone who would listen about her daughter's dreams, her talent, her bright future that had been interrupted by the impossible. "People keep asking if we think they're still alive," Margaret said during a television interview 6 months after the disappearance. "I know they're alive. I can feel it. Sometimes I dream about Emma and she's still 17, still wearing that white dress. She tells me she's waiting, that she's safe, but she can't come home until we understand what happened." The Rivera family took a more active approach, hiring private investigators and psychics, following up on every reported sighting and alleged supernatural encounter. Carmen Rivera spent her life savings on consultations with experts in unexplained phenomena, desperate for any clue that might lead to her son's return. The Chen family, with their medical backgrounds, approached the situation scientifically. They funded research into temporal anomalies, parallel dimensions, and the physics of consciousness. Dr. James Chen, Sarah's father, took a leave of absence from his cardiology practice to study quantum mechanics, convinced that science held the answer to his daughter's disappearance. By 1997, 2 years after the disappearance, the FBI officially classified the Riverside High School case as a cold case. Active investigation ceased, though the file remained open and investigators continued to follow up on any new leads. The underground theater was sealed again, this time with steel barriers and concrete. The main theater above was permanently closed, deemed too psychologically traumatic for continued use. Riverside High School's drama program was relocated to a new building across town. But Cedar Falls couldn't forget. The story of the vanishing theater class became part of local folklore, passed down through whispers and urban legends. Tour guides in the town began including the high school on haunted history walking tours, though the building itself remained off-limits to the public. Paranormal investigators from around the world made pilgrimages to Cedar Falls, hoping to experience whatever force had claimed the 17 students. Most left disappointed, but a few reported strange phenomena. Unexplained sounds from the abandoned theater, glimpses of figures in period costumes moving through the darkened hallways, and the unmistakable sound of Shakespearean dialogue echoing from empty rooms. The families never gave up. Every October 13th, they gathered at the school for a memorial service, keeping alive the memory of their children and maintaining hope for an impossible reunion. October 13, 2024. 29 years to the day after the disappearance. The abandoned Riverside High School had stood empty for over a decade, its windows boarded, its hallways silent. The building was scheduled for demolition, finally succumbing to structural problems and the town's desire to move on from its tragic history. Marcus Rivera Sr., Romeo's father, had spent nearly 3 decades as a private investigator, never officially giving up his search for his son. When he learned about the planned demolition, he made one final request to the Cedar Falls City Council: allow him to be present when they breached the sealed basement one last time. "I need to know," he told the council members, his voice heavy with almost 30 years of grief. "Before you destroy that building forever, I need to see if there's anything we missed. Any clue that might tell us what happened to our children." The council, moved by his persistence and the approaching anniversary, granted his request. The demolition crew agreed to carefully remove the steel barriers that had sealed the underground theater since 1995. Marcus Sr. would be allowed one final examination of the space where his son's costume had been found all those years ago. As the barriers came down, something unprecedented happened. The underground theater was no longer empty. What the demolition crew found defied explanation even more than the original disappearance. The 17 costumes were gone, but in their place, arranged with the same careful precision, were 17 graduation caps and gowns. Each bore the Riverside High School emblem and the year 1996, the year the missing students should have graduated. Beside each cap and gown lay a diploma, officially signed and sealed, conferring a Riverside High School degree upon each of the 17 missing students. The diplomas appeared authentic in every detail, down to the official school seal and the signatures of administrators who had left the district years ago. But most impossible of all, the diplomas were dated May 15, 1996, and they appeared to have been artificially aged to look exactly as they would have after 28 years. Marcus Sr. stood in the underground theater, trembling as he picked up his son's diploma. Marcus Rivera Jr., it read in formal calligraphy. Having completed all requirements for graduation, is hereby granted this diploma with all rights and privileges pertaining thereto. At the bottom, in handwriting he recognized as his son's, was a message: "Dad, I graduated. I'm sorry it took so long. Tell Mom I love her. We're ready to come home." Agent Walsh, now retired but called back for this final development, examined each diploma with growing amazement. "These are real," she announced. "The paper, the ink, the seals, everything indicates these are genuine Riverside High School diplomas issued in 1996. But that's impossible. These students disappeared in October 1995, months before graduation." As investigators processed the scene, something extraordinary began to happen in the underground theater. The vintage electrical systems, dormant for decades, began to hum with life. Lights that hadn't functioned since the 1930s flickered on, casting a warm golden glow across the Art Deco walls. The ancient sound system crackled to life, and through speakers that should have been long dead came a sound that made everyone freeze: applause. It wasn't the thin, tinny sound of old recordings. This was live applause, enthusiastic and joyful, as if an invisible audience was celebrating something wonderful. Marcus Sr. stood transfixed as the applause faded and was replaced by voices. 17 voices speaking in unison, their tones now mature, adult, but unmistakably familiar to the parents who had spent nearly 3 decades listening for them in every crowd, every phone call, every moment of silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voices said, echoing through the underground space with perfect acoustics, "thank you for your patience. After 29 years, our performance is finally complete. We have learned our lines, lived our characters, and discovered the truth that was hidden beneath the stage." Agent Walsh activated her recording equipment, capturing every word. "We want you to know that we were never truly gone. We were in a place between places, a theater where time moves differently, where stories become real and reality becomes story. We aged, we grew, we learned, and we waited for the moment when we could take our final bow." Marcus Sr. stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Marcus? Son, is that you?" One voice separated from the chorus, older now but unmistakably his child. "It's me, Dad. I'm okay. We're all okay. We've been together all this time, taking care of each other, just like Mrs. Rodriguez taught us. We became a real family." Emma's voice joined next. "Mom, I know you're listening. I finished the performance. Juliet got her happy ending after all." Sarah's voice, still precise and organized after all these years. "We have so much to tell you, but first, you need to understand what happened to us and why we had to stay away so long." Through the ancient speakers, the 17 voices began to tell their story, a tale so impossible that it challenged every assumption about reality, time, and the power of human will. "When the lights went out that night," Emma's voice explained, "we didn't disappear. We fell. The stage beneath our feet opened like a trapdoor, but instead of falling into the basement, we fell through time itself." Marcus continued the narrative. "We landed in 1934 in the original Orpheum Theater, during the performance of The Vanishing Cabinet. We found the 12 vaudeville performers who had disappeared that night, still young, still in their costumes, still confused about what had happened to them." Sarah's voice, ever the stage manager, provided the details. "The theater exists in a pocket outside normal time. A place where performances never end, where the magic of live theater becomes literally magical. The 12 performers from 1934 had been trapped there for 61 years, waiting for someone to complete the story." "Complete what story?" Agent Walsh called out. Jessica's voice answered, "The story of sacrifice and redemption. You see, the theater feeds on stories, on the emotions and dreams of performers. But it had become corrupted, selfish, keeping people trapped instead of celebrating their art. We had to teach it a different way. David's voice joined in. We spent 29 years learning the true history of the theater. Every performer who ever graced that stage, every story that was told, every dream that was pursued. We became the guardians of those stories. But why couldn't you come home? Marcus Sr. pleaded. Tommy's voice, now mature and resonant, because we had to grow up first. We had to become the people we were meant to be, learn the lessons we were supposed to learn. The theater wouldn't let us leave until we understood that some responsibilities are bigger than our own desires. Through their collective voice, the 17 former students revealed what their existence had been like in the timeless theater. Time moved differently there, Alicia explained. A day could feel like a week or a year could pass in what felt like an afternoon. But we experienced every moment of growing up. We had birthdays, celebrations, arguments, reconciliations. We became adults. Maria's voice added, the 12 performers from 1934 became our teachers, our surrogate family. They had spent 61 years learning the secrets of the theater, understanding its needs and its pain. They taught us that the building wasn't evil, it was lonely. Kevin's voice carried a note of wonder. We performed every night for an audience of ghosts, everyone who had ever loved theater, ever dreamed of being on stage, ever lost themselves in a story. We kept their memories alive. Ashley continued, we staged every play ever written, lived every character ever imagined. We became Shakespeare and Shaw, Tennessee Williams and August Wilson. We were every hero and villain, every lover and fool. Robert's voice revealed the deeper purpose. But the most important thing we learned was that stories have power. Real power. The power to heal, to transform, to connect people across time and space. The theater had forgotten that lesson. It had become possessive, hoarding stories instead of sharing them. Lisa's voice carried the weight of years, so we made a deal. We would stay and learn, grow and perform until we could teach the theater how to let go. How to release the stories it had been holding captive. Stephen added, it took 29 years for us to fully understand. 29 years to become wise enough, strong enough, to break the cycle that had trapped performers for a century. Catherine's voice picked up the tale. In 2020, we finally had the breakthrough. We discovered that the theater's hunger for stories came from a place of love, not malice. It wanted to preserve the magic of live performance, to keep the dreams of artists alive forever. Brian's voice continued, but preservation without release isn't love, it's fear. Fear that the magic will be lost, that the stories will be forgotten, that the connection between performer and audience will fade. Diana's voice revealed the solution. We taught the theater a new way. Instead of trapping performers, it could celebrate them. Instead of holding on to stories, it could help them grow and spread into the world. James's voice carried triumph. The 12 performers from 1934 were finally able to move on. They took their final bow and stepped into whatever comes after life, their stories complete and their dreams fulfilled. Amy's voice, the youngest of the group, now spoke with adult wisdom, and we began preparing for our own final performance. We knew that someday someone would break through the barriers above and give us the chance to return to the world we had left. But why today? Agent Walsh asked. Why now after all these years? Emma's voice answered, because today marks exactly 29 years since we fell through time. In the theater's dimension, that's long enough for us to have completed a full cycle of learning and growth. We're finally old enough, wise enough to come home. Marcus's voice added, and because our families never gave up. Your love, your hope, your refusal to forget us, that created a bridge between the theater's dimension and your world. Strong enough for us to cross back over. The lights in the underground theater began to pulse gently, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with possibility. We can't come back in our physical bodies, Sarah's voice explained with her characteristic directness. Too much time has passed and we've become something different. But we can give you something more important than our presence. We can give you closure. We want you to know that we lived full lives, Jessica's voice said. We had careers, relationships, adventures. We grew up even if it was in a place outside normal time. We became the people we were meant to be. I became a teacher, David's voice revealed. I taught the vaudeville performers how to read and write. Some of them had never had the chance to learn. I became a doctor, Alicia said. I helped heal the emotional wounds that some of the trapped performers carried from their earthly lives. I became a director, Marcus announced. I staged productions that helped everyone process their experiences and find peace. I became a writer, Emma said. I wrote down every story, every memory, every lesson we learned. Someday those stories will find their way into the world. One by one, each of the 17 voices shared what they had become during their time in the timeless theater. Each had found their calling, pursued their passion, and contributed to a community that existed beyond the normal boundaries of life and death. As the golden light in the underground theater grew brighter, each of the 17 former students took a moment to speak directly to their families. Mom, Emma's voice said, filled with love and gratitude, thank you for never giving up. Thank you for sitting on those school steps every day, keeping my memory alive. I want you to know that I got to perform Juliet thousands of times, and in every performance I thought of you in the audience, proud of your daughter. Dad, Marcus's voice called out, you became the man I always hoped to be, someone who never stops fighting for the people he loves. I know you spent your life looking for me and you found me. Maybe not the way you expected, but you found me. Mom and Dad, Sarah's voice said to the Chens, I finally finished the most important production of my life. I managed a theater company for 29 years, and we never missed a single performance. I think you'd be proud of my organizational skills. One by one, each student left a final message for their families, words of love, gratitude, and reassurance that their years of waiting and hoping had not been in vain. As the last personal messages were delivered, the 17 voices joined together one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, thank you for your patience and your love. Our performance is now complete. We have learned our lines, lived our characters, and discovered that the greatest story of all is the one that connects us to the people who love us. The golden light began to fade slowly, gently, like the dimming of theater lights at the end of a show. We take our final bow now, not in sorrow but in celebration. We lived, we loved, we grew, and we never forgot where we came from. The curtain falls on our story, but the theater of memory will keep us alive forever. Until we meet again, Emma's voice whispered, in whatever theater awaits beyond this world. Until we meet again, Marcus echoed. Until we meet again, Sarah added. And one by one, all 17 voices faded into silence, leaving behind only the gentle hum of vintage electrical systems slowly powering down. The underground theater fell silent, but the peace that settled over the space was profound and complete. The investigators, demolition crew, and Marcus Sr. stood in reverent quiet, processing what they had just experienced. Agent Walsh checked her recording equipment and found that every word had been captured clearly. The impossible conversation was now documented evidence, though she knew that no official report could fully convey the emotional truth of what had occurred. Marcus Sr. picked up his son's diploma one more time, holding it against his chest like a treasure. He graduated, he whispered. After all these years, he finally graduated. The diplomas were carefully collected and returned to the families. Each one was authentic in every detail, bearing the signatures of teachers and administrators, stamped with official seals, and aged exactly as they would have been after 28 years. But more than the physical artifacts, the families now had something they had been seeking for nearly 3 decades. Answers, closure, and the knowledge that their children had lived full, meaningful lives, even if those lives had been spent in a dimension beyond normal understanding. The demolition of Riverside High School proceeded as planned, but the underground theater was carefully preserved. By unanimous city council vote, the space was converted into a memorial for the 17 students and the 12 vaudeville performers who had finally found peace. The Memorial Theater, known as the Orpheum Memorial, became a place of pilgrimage for families of missing persons, theater enthusiasts, and anyone seeking hope in the face of impossible loss. The 17 graduation caps and gowns were displayed in a place of honor, along with photographs of each student and excerpts from the recorded conversation that documented their final performance. A plaque in the center of the memorial space bore the inscription, "In memory of those who remind us that some stories transcend time, space, and understanding." Their final bow was not an ending but a transformation. 5 years have passed since the final performance of the Riverside High School drama class. The families have found peace, though they continue to gather every October 13th to celebrate the lives and legacy of their children. Margaret Williams became a counselor for families of missing persons, using her experience to help others navigate the impossible journey of hope and grief. Emma taught me that love transcends physical presence, she often tells the families she helps. Our children live on in our memories, our stories, and our refusal to give up. Marcus Rivera Sr. established a foundation that provides scholarships for students pursuing careers in theater and the arts. My son reminded me that performance is sacred, he explains. When we tell stories, when we become characters, when we connect with audiences, we're participating in something larger than ourselves. The Orpheum Memorial has become a thriving cultural center, hosting performances by young artists who understand that they're participating in a tradition that spans generations. The actors who perform there often report feeling inspired, supported, as if the theater itself is encouraging their efforts. And sometimes, just sometimes, audience members claim to hear additional applause during the curtain call. 17 voices now at peace, celebrating the continuation of the stories they helped preserve. The mystery of the vanishing theater class has been solved, but the story continues. Because some tales don't end with explanations, they end with the understanding that love, hope, and the power of human connection can transcend any barrier, even the boundary between life and whatever lies beyond. In Cedar Falls, Illinois, the theater lights never truly go out. They just wait in the darkness for the next story to begin, the next group of dreamers to step into the spotlight and remind us all that magic is real, love is eternal, and some performances never truly end. They just take different stages.